Hello, tadpoles. It's time for Mr. Bruce. Before we start, we're going to have our eyes watching, ears listening, voices quiet, body calm, and let's not forget, glasses on. Yeah, we're ready now. Well, it's Friday, and that means we're back to Curious George. This time, Curious George makes maple syrup, which we love on our pancakes. George loved mornings in the country. Sunday was his favorite morning of all because Sunday was pancake day. Today, the man with the yellow hat was teaching George how to make pancakes. When they start to get bubbly, it means they're ready to flip over, his friend said. George flipped each pancake as it was ready. 1, 2, 3. George started pouring a lot of syrup on his pancakes. Whoa, whoa, go easy on that maple syrup, George. It doesn't grow on trees, the man said. Then he thought for a moment and he said, well, actually, in a way it does grow on trees. George was confused. He imagined picking bottles of syrup off of the trees like apples. The man explained that the syrup doesn't actually grow on the trees. It comes from inside the trees. All you have to do is tap them. George had poured all of the syrup on his pancakes. Now there was no syrup left for his friend. But George had an idea. There were plenty of trees outside. All he had to do was tap them. George put on his coat and went outside. There were many trees on the Renkinsons' farm. He tapped on each tree like he was knocking on a door. Hello, hello, do you have any syrup for me? George's friends, Allie and Mrs. Renkins, came over to see what he was doing. George, are you knocking on that tree? Why? George showed them the syrup bottle. Oh, are you looking for syrup? Mr. Renkins asked. First, you've got to tap the tree to get its sap, Mr. Renkins explained. When I say rap, that doesn't mean knock on it. You have to hammer the tap into the trees, and it's like a little faucet on your sink. Then you can collect the sap in a bucket, like this. Mr. Rankin showed him. See where the tree goes? Right there. Mr. Rankin had an extra bucket to spare, so George and Allie could collect their own sap. George was very excited. He could cover mountains and mountains of pancakes with a whole bucket of maple syrup. Mr. Rankins explained that to find a maple tree, you have to know the characteristics to look for. That means what do they look like and feel like. Maple trees, he said, have a gray bark with deep, deep ridges, and they grow their own special leaves. The leaves have 5 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just like a bottle of syrup. After Mr. Rankin showed them how to tap a maple tree, George and Allie were ready to tap one of their own. But finding the right tree was not easy. After spotting one that had gray bark and deep ridges and 5-pointed leaves, they knew they had found the right kind of tree. The sap dripped and dripped slowly and slowly, and George and Allie waited and waited and waited. They must have tapped the slowest tree in the farm, but it wasn't the slowest tree. All trees sapped very, very slowly. Finally, George's bucket was full. Now, they just needed to make some pancakes. Back at the house, Allie and George surprised their friend with a pancake breakfast and their new syrup. But when the man poured the syrup on his pancakes, it didn't taste like maple syrup at all. What had gone wrong? They went back to Mr. Rankins for answers. He explained to them that sap from the tree becomes maple syrup only after you boil it. Luckily, he could help them boil the syrup into the sugar shack. Into the shack they went. It takes a while to boil, but if you leave it too long, it can bubble over and burn. I'm going to check on the cows. Can you two keep an eye on the sap? George and Allie watched the sap and waited for it to boil. Mr. Rankins was right. It was taking a very, very, very long time, and they were getting very, very, very tired. Suddenly, the sap began to boil over. George tried to fan the sap with pancakes to cool it down, but the butter on the pancake kept slipping off and into the pan. The butter smoothed out the sap and kept it from boiling over. It was a good thing. Mr. Rinkins returned and said that the butter had stopped the sap from burning, and now it had finally turned into syrup. With the help of Allie and Mr. Rinkins, George made his own bottle of very own maple syrup. The next Sunday, George made pancakes for his friend and poured his homemade maple syrup on them. "Thanks, George," said the man. "This is the best Sunday morning syrup I have ever had." The end. Well, that was a good book, wasn't it? I always wondered how maple syrup was made. Well, here's my question for today. George loved pancakes with maple syrup. What is your favorite breakfast of all time? What do you like more than anything else for breakfast? Okay, before I go, I want to give a special shout out to Aaron, who has a birthday coming up tomorrow. Happy birthday, Aaron. We're going to see you next week when I'm back with some more stories. Until then, be good and wash your hands. Bye-bye.